Welcome to episode 114 of the Social Selling Podcast by Linking into Sales. I'm Martin Brossman.
I'm Greg Heyer.
And I'm Elise Archer.
What an exciting show. I'm just beside myself. We've been working for a few years to try to get one of the great authors of the Challenger Customer on, and we're going to cover a few things first. But Nick, thanks. Several of your guys said, well, I recommend this person. And so you were put on the list as go-to. I don't know if you got the short end of the stick or the long, but we're great to have you here.
It totally depends on how you look at that, guys. But I'm glad to be here nonetheless. So thanks for having me.
Excellent.
Very good. Yeah. So let's first kick off with just a little bit of social selling news. And, when we talk about social selling news, we try to talk about some of the things that are happening with the social networks and other services out there that we might use. The one thing, I got one little piece of news here that I want to share with everyone to make sure that everyone's aware of this. But right now, LinkedIn, we know them as a very kind of a closed ecosystem, and they have a tendency to not integrate so well with a number of companies,
or play well,
and they don't play well. And we're hoping that with the Microsoft acquisition of LinkedIn, that they kind of open it up a little bit, and knowing Microsoft and how they have a tendency to really dislike antitrust matters. This might be an opportunity for them to kind of open up the doors a little bit, let some folks in. So there's this company called HiQ. And what HiQ does, they're based out of San Francisco. And what HiQ does is actually predicts when somebody is likely to leave the company. Right. And the way that they do this is by going and actually tapping into information that your activity and things like that are that you do publicly on LinkedIn. Well, LinkedIn doesn't like companies that scrape their data, and actually they continuously revamp their privacy policy to cover scraping data off of LinkedIn. And some of you might remember a tool called SalesLoft. They got in a little bit of trouble with that as well. There's a number of others out there too that before the new interface, what the tools would do is actually go out and create profile views, which you get people to look back at your profile. So hopefully, I think what LinkedIn tried to do with the changes here recently to the interface was to slow that down and actually put things in place so that way you couldn't scrape data out of it. Well, HiQ Labs is actually suing Microsoft because this information that we publicly put out there is public, basically. So there's a court battle going on right now in San Francisco. I'll put a link to in the show notes if you want to check it out. Just go out to linkingintosales.com/podcast. Look for episode 114, and you can read more about it there. But this is going to be developing. We're going to kind of follow this too, because we know there's a number of sales tools out there that we can use in conjunction with LinkedIn to be able to help us get some more information and store it where we need it, so that way we can quickly follow up with folks.
That's interesting. Right. So another way. Great.
Yep. So that right there is good. Twitter is growing in popularity again.
Woo!
That's good. So, but they do this every couple of years, right? In addition to all the streaming video now that you can watch on there, there's they rolled out a brand new look to the UI. They seem to did it all at once. They rolled out the new desktop interface. They also rolled out the new apps for Android and for iOS. So there was no griping back and forth saying, well, when does Android get it? And when does iOS get it? And blah, blah, blah. But so far the experience has been great. They've just, kind of polished up the UI a little bit. Looking forward to some new features also coming out soon. And of course, continue to listen here to the podcast to get that information since you probably don't follow it as closely as I do.
Well, I'm excited about it because I was just telling in my social media management class, LinkedIn and Twitter are permission granted resources. You're not invading their Facebook page here. And that's why I like them, because it's data that we have permission to use. They're putting it out in the area for people to check it out. And I want Twitter to succeed. I like it. I like the dialogue. I like get to the point. And I've been a fan for a long time. So always looking forward to their success. And I think there's nothing like it out there. There's no real substitute. So,
the world needs Twitter.
Yeah, that's our vote.
So one last bit of news as well is that Snapchat, we've actually talked about that previously on the podcast and how you can use that to kind of engage with your customers and your prospects and, do face swaps. I send Martin a message the other day looking like a giraffe. Felt like my neck was all stretched. So that was fun. But that's the kind of fun engagement stuff you can actually do with Snapchat. And, if your prospects and customers, if you're following them back and forth, but they rolled out a number of new features, including a map, which is causing quite a stir around privacy. So I'll put a link to the show notes to an article for that if you want to read a little bit more about it and get some perspective on it too.
So they can stalk where you are now and find out. Wow. And I'll just say it happens. The activation involves kind of spreading your fingers out on the page, and then you'll see it. So at least know what's going on, because if you're new using Snapchat, you want to know that it's amazing how it shows where you are. Now, I'm happy to tell people where I am, and also a younger group's often very pleased with it, but many people in my age group aren't as happy to let it know. So this is something, especially if you're interacting with your kids, you probably should at least pay attention and know what's going on with it.
Yes. So I think that's about it for the news today. But let's talk about real quick. Elise, you got anything you want to share
with news?
News, man. No, I was just thinking about with Twitter. I mean, now that Rob Kardashian's been kicked off of Instagram, I think Twitter may finally have some hope now that he's taken to Twitter. So you guys have no idea what I'm talking about. There's like one person who's listening who knows what I'm talking about. So anyway, that's my input. I think there's hope.
Okay. And by the time this gets announced, Elise, you may be in another area of the United States too.
Oh, was that my news that I was supposed to share? Yeah. Oh, that. Well, nobody probably really cares about that. But yes, we are moving to Atlanta end of the week. So very excited. We're taking the Social Selling Podcast in a couple different states.
That's right. We'll act like they're divisions. We've got the Triangle Division and the Atlanta Division.
We're going global, guys.
Global.
Yeah.
And let's talk a minute about.
We'll conquer the Southeast one state at a time,
That's right. Let's just mention our.
Don't send me to Alabama. Sorry.
Okay. Hey, watch that. I like that too. Anyway, let's mention our sponsor here, which is actually the Social Selling Training ourselves now.
We sponsor ourselves.
Our sponsor is that Social Selling Training, and this is the week we are doing the final touches on our Fundamentals of Social Selling online training. It has been something where we just kept hammering, that's not good enough, let's upgrade, that's not good enough, let's upgrade. So this is the call to completion, and hundreds of hours and hours of work and research and thinking and arguing we put into this. So I'm very excited that will be out, but go check out socialselling.training. Anything else you want to add to it?
No, I'm looking forward to when they get this course out there. We'll be out in August.
Last, just a shout out to Andy Beal that was kind enough to give us a recommendation on iTunes. So I had said the new people doing it, a set number, I would review the LinkedIn profile. So Andy, if you want it, I'll offer it. I don't think you need it, but and we hope to have him on the show soon too, as well.
Another quick couple things too is that we actually put some updates out on linkinintosales.com and wanted to link out to all the articles so far that have been written about us that include us as one of the top sales podcasts to listen to. So what we want you to do is not only just, go out there, check out the list, but check out the other podcasts that are out there too. We had this morning, we actually had one of our listeners over in the Netherlands, who is originally from Brazil, Carlos, who basically, put out there on both on Facebook and on LinkedIn, just his saying thank you to all of the folks that he follows, including a number of folks, the three of us and a couple other folks. I can't remember who they are. Anyways, there's a number of folks that he's following that has actually helped him with sales. So who you take and have help you kind of teach you this new sales engagement process. It's important. Whoever you decide to take and put in that circle, I would definitely go out there and thank some folks too. You could do it by leaving a review on the podcast. You could just do it by sharing with your colleagues who you're listening to and who you're engaging with as well. So we appreciate it. We'll actually acknowledge any thanks that you guys put out there.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. Now, talking about our show and our guest, Greg, would you tell us what amazing person we have with us today?
I'm excited about this, but first, before we get to the bio, I want Elise to read this comment that she got about.
Oh,
about having
yeah,
this
the
guest on
show.
here.
Go ahead,
Go ahead,
Elise.
Elise.
Yeah.
you.
So this is so funny. You know how sometimes the planets and stars align? And I don't think they could have aligned more perfectly this weekend because I got a text from one of my friends, David Strange. She works at a company called My Employees over here in Wilmington, North Carolina. And he sends me this text and he's like, oh my God, I'm listening to the most amazing book on Audible. Best book on selling to big companies that I've ever read. You've got to check it out. So I follow the link. And what do you know? The book happened to be written by the very amazing author we have coming on our show today. So sure enough, it was a link to the Challenger customer. And I just cracked up. I was like, well, funny enough, you are going to be extra excited because we are interviewing him on Monday. And so he said, man, he was like, I think this book is going to be essential to the future of enterprise sales. He said, this will be the reason big, in all caps, deals are won or lost. Being in enterprise sales, it's already helping shed some light. Can't wait to hear your podcast. So, I mean, I don't know what better endorsement you could get than that.
I know.
I thought that was pretty cool.
That's true. So, all right. Well, then I think that's awesome. I remember when the Challenger customer came out. We'll talk about how I ended up getting a hold of the audio copy and the actual paper copy too. So I have both. So I'm a true fan. So let's talk about our guest. Nick Toman is the head of sales and service practice at CEB, now Gartner, and co-author of The Challenger Customer, the follow-up to the popular book, The Challenger Sale. Nick and his team work with over 850 organizations worldwide, delivering insightful sales effectiveness and support. He has been with CEB, now Gartner, since 2004. CEB, as a matter of fact, now I continue to say now Gartner, is because it was actually acquired by Gartner in 2017. CEB also stands for Corporate Executive Board, in case you're not familiar with the acronym. Gartner, of course, is that large analyst organization where I'm sure we'll learn a little bit more about that. But Nick, thank you very much, and welcome to the show.
Yeah, Martin, Greg, Elise, thanks so much.
So, I mean, this has been a long time coming. I've been, where did I first learn about the book? I learned about the book when I was watching, I think Brent, one of the other co-authors of the book, talk at Sales Connect, LinkedIn Sales Connect. And he gave this amazing presentation. And I went out, I got the audiobook as soon as I could. And then I want a copy of it too. So I just want to say thank you to Marketing Experiments or Marketing Sherpa for sending me a copy of that book. I love it.
Yeah, and you sent to me. I saw the video and go, we gotta consume this and get it on the show. Yeah. Excellent. And I want to just say I've been able to pass it on with clients that are very excited about applying it in their business and sales. So this is something that works in the real world, and that's why it's been great. It's been a while to try to coordinate someone and get you on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. And it's fantastic to hear about your different experiences with the book and getting texts about the book. And so we love it. And now, if anybody has ever had the chance to see Brent Adamson, who's one of my coworkers and co-authors, give a good talk about the book. I mean, he does a great job. So for those of you who are watching and want to get a dose of Brent, you can look him up on YouTube and see some really good videos recapping, some of the book talks that we do as well. So.
You're speaking here in this book of a new world, which to me looks more like the way families are being pushed together through divorce and brought back together, where I was listening to one book and he goes, how do you categorize third removed, brothers and sisters and so forth? And the fragmented families that we've tragically seen in our society. Now I'm seeing this in corporations where fierce competitors now are across the hall from each other. Yeah. And things are changing so fast that they can barely keep up. And there's silos in companies where internally they're fighting and not even in alignment, and the loyalties are more complicated inside the systems. And I think that's where you're starting to touch on. And one of the pieces I'll just begin with is one of your latest articles you have, where the idea we've got to really back up and be an advocate for helping them even decide what the problem is. And I love this, Nick, because I've coached so many people where they go, well, the customer needs to know what they want before I can help them. I go, no, your job is to help them figure out what they want.
Yeah.
And and how they're settling for good enough. So I want to start there and let you comment on that, because I think the salespeople are still starting too late and then thinking it's all their fault because they didn't have a good enough pitch or something, where they're at the wrong end of the customer's journey.
Sure, and I think we can dive deeper into the sales side of it in a moment. But I think the important thing is what you started with, which is this brilliant, bright, sunny picture of how functional and how well-behaved customers are. And the reality is, it's a daunting. You mentioned sort of dysfunctional families. I mean, it is to a degree. That's the reality that our customers are operating with. And I think a big part of what we tried to do with the book and a lot of our research lately is go into greater detail around what are these buying dynamics? How are decisions really being made? And the reality is this isn't, a nice family get together where everybody's sitting around the table and cordial. The reality is you have companies that are, to your point, highly siloed. Increasingly matrixed, where nobody really has clear decision rights or decision authority. Everybody kind of has a say. Everybody's viewing the world slightly differently. They don't understand the problem from the same angle, let alone the solution, let alone a supplier they should work with to fix whatever's wrong. And so, I talk a lot about customer dysfunction, and it's funny because I've gotten some heat out there in social media for saying, you can't call your customer dysfunctional, but you sit down and you actually talk with customers. And we do this all the time. We go and we interview them and we say, okay, well, in one word, describe your last purchase experience, your last significant, fairly complex, fairly expensive purchase. Just tell us about it, one word. And the one that always stands out in my mind is someone actually looked at us and said, landmine. And we said, well, that's not an adjective. Try to describe it. And the guy said, landmine-ish. And I think that's the reality that customers are faced with. And you just, if you just reflect on your own experiences inside your own company, it's not like you guys are doing your own thing together. Do you guys get along all the time? Do you make the same decision? Do you guys view the world the same way? Absolutely not. And you know each other. Enterprise sale into consideration where some of these customers have never even met each other. They're in the same team, right? Same organization, but they've never met each other, never worked together, and you're expecting them to get along at that same level. So I think being really empathetic and just understanding the new normal you're tasked with as a seller, selling into this environment, we really got to first understand that before we can even think about early, late, middle, where are we entering and what do we have to do?
And I want to just jump into one more question on this is, how do we build the trust so they'll let us help them even define their problem? Now, in a one-on-one coaching situation, it's great because they're still looking for me, in that area, if I'm doing that. But in the sales complex, we've got to look for those cracks and, of course, have good customer insight in our content. But how do we start there? Because we've got to really get back up a little before they fully formalize the problem to help them identify it.
Yeah, and look, guys, the reality is it all starts with the customer. And I say that, and you're probably going to have a lot of viewers and listeners going, well, yeah, no, duh, Nick. But I would ask you to really think about how you're starting into these conversations. And I think most of us, from a sales vantage point, start with what we're comfortable with, which is our products, our capabilities, what's new, what we think the customer should be doing, how we think they should be behaving, using our products, our services. What we find is that the best sellers, and guys, I wish I could show you all the data, all the interviews, all the research we've done in this, but the best sellers continually start with the customer, and not just what the customer isn't doing or has missed necessarily, but they start with what the customer is doing. Because here's the one thing, and this is a bit of a trivia question. I often give book talks, and I ask this question of the audience. I say, what's the one thing every single person in this room is selling? Right? You've got different companies, different industries, different sectors, you name it. And everybody kind of looks around puzzled, and you hear people murmur things like value or solutions or value-added capabilities. You hear that kind of stuff. And I always stop them and I say, look, the one thing you're all selling is change. Every single company in the world is selling change. Stop doing this, start doing that, right? Stop buying this, start buying that. If you're selling change, and the number one thing your customer doesn't want to do is change, well, you're in a bit of a pickle. And so when we help companies think about them, I've got to go in and help them change. I first need to start with, well, what is the customer doing in the first place? How are they thinking about their business? And I want the customer to get to a point where they're saying, yeah, that's kind of how we're thinking about things, before I begin to show them how their thinking might be flawed or obsolete or old, or something they have changed in their markets or in their products or in their competitive set. But if I just start with those issues, right? What's changed? It doesn't mean anything to them. If I'm going to start with, here's what I want you to do, it doesn't mean anything to you until I say, here's what we're effectively seeing. Here's what companies like you are doing. And you probably have a good sense, and you can begin that dialogue and get them to open up about, yeah, here's what we are in fact doing, before you can say time out. Now let's talk about where the flaws and what we're seeing around that particular approach to managing your businesses.
Selling change. I like that. That's very thought provoking, because I guess, then if we're selling change, then how, I guess, what does it look like then for us to, as sales folks, to go in and convince them that they need the change that we can provide?
Yeah, well, it starts, Greg, with first we've got to get to that point of acknowledging what they're currently doing. I've got to create dissonance with what they're currently doing. And I can't create dissonance definition. I can't do that unless I've actually put that on the table. We use this really simple model. In fact, we talk about it a lot in the book. We call it the A to B model. And the A is basically, what is the customer currently doing? And the B is, what do we want them doing? Okay. The A is their current beliefs, their current approach to managing their business, their current set of assumptions around how they think their business even works. The B is what we want them to think. And if you take any piece of sales collateral, any message, any content that your marketing teams might be producing, it's all about the B. It's all about what we want the customer to do. And you put it in front of the customer and you say, oh, that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought of it that way. I wonder what's for lunch, right? It's hard to capture someone's interest unless I've actually taken what they're currently doing, gotten some degree of confirmation around that, and then I start to poke and prod and pick at that and show them that there's flaws, real flaws with real economic consequences. And only then can I begin to, show them a better way forward, that there's something that they can do, which, by the way, my company is best positioned to help you take that particular course of action. But notice, I'm not talking about my products right away. I'm talking about their business, how they're managing it, where the flaws are with that, what they should be doing instead, and finally, how I can best help you take that course of action. And we think that choreography, that approach, is a really, really powerful one, where you're not going to shut the customer down because you're talking about yourself, your features, your benefits, your capabilities. You're talking about their business and real consequences for their business.
All right, so all those folks who are sending out pitches in your first LinkedIn message are doing it completely wrong, right? This is confirmation.
My gosh, you're
this
kidding.
Is confirmation that this is because they're not addressing what we're currently doing, right?
But he just wrote 3 paragraphs. I got one today. He obviously cared about me.
Indeed.
One more thing on this that I see, I was just reading your LinkedIn article, and then at least want to get your input, is this really understanding that they're in a battle with conflict possibly in their plays. And your job is also to maybe help them minimize the pain of that battle, because what humans tend to do, and you stated in your LinkedIn article I just read, is if we're going to face enough conflict, most people will just go, I'll just settle for good enough. And
right.
Gosh, if I survive this, that's it. And I don't think we need to not underestimate the influence of surrendering in the face of conflict internally. And that another one of our jobs might be, how do we help it so they don't have to go through as much pain in their own system? Just be aware of it that occurs as well.
We've talked a little bit so far about just the fact that customers can and often are dysfunctional themselves, right? Just to get a lot of people making a decision. And our data would tell us, in the book, we actually published a figure, 5.4 stakeholders on average are involved in a deal. That number, we continue to track the number carefully. That number is now up to 6.8. And so we watch this number tick upwards. And what you're seeing is it's not just the different number of people, but it's the diversity of their perspectives. It's different functions, different teams, different levels, right? If you're selling technology, it might be an end user interfacing with a CFO as part of this buying group. Well, that's a tough, different type of conversation. So you have the people, which is one thing we have to be aware of. But the other thing we're seeing is that today's solutions have so many configurations, so many different possible approaches, that there's literally an infinite number of options as to which direction you could take that solution. So that's another big thing. And finally, there's just this glut of information available that people have to sift through, your customers have to sift through. And you have different vendors. On average, you have anywhere from 3 to 4 vendors typically in a given deal who are pushing more information. So you have all this information. So you talk about that point, Martin, around surrender. I mean, that's exactly what you arrive at. I've got infighting with different people and different perspectives, a bazillion options we could consider, and information that's telling me all kinds of different things. No wonder people put their hands up in the air and say, you know what, let's just buy something. I don't care. It seems like it's good enough. And you know what, get the cheapest one while you're at it. And that's where the permission kind of settles. That's where the group can reach consensus. It's not, let's really do the right thing for our business. Let's really take advantage of a bold and proper solution for our company. They just kind of give up and just sort of, at some point meet in the middle of all this stuff. And this is the route we see increasing number of deals go if they can even get across the line of making a purchase. And we know more and more deals just simply, they never even get to this point because of all those dynamics working against customers. And so when you step back and you look at it, what we're seeing is that the very best salespeople are saying, you know what? I can treat this as an advantage. I can treat all this confusion, all these dynamics as an advantage, and I can actually, in many ways, coach my customer through buying this really complex thing and better position myself, better earn their trust, better earn, my seat, quote unquote, at the table, even though you may not be literally at the table with the customer, but that level of trust really does increase when you're helping them navigate. Here's 3 things you're going to hear. Here's why that's not so important. Don't worry about that information. Here's what your IT department's going to say. And here's how to approach them because they're going to have this concern. Here's what your finance partners are going to say. They're going to have this concern. Here's how you need to think through that. So really kind of coaching the customer, we're seeing as a huge, huge advantage, in dealing with all these confusing dynamics that everybody's trying to battle through just to make a decision.
So in dealing with the confusion and the chaos of trying to sell to the 5.4 and, different people in charge of different things, one of the things that you talk in the book, one of the strategies is identifying, well, who's actually going to be able to champion my cause within the organization, right? And you talk about identifying the difference between a mobilizer versus a talker. And so for any of our audience who haven't heard the book, and just for my own personal reasons, I'd like to hear your perspective on it. Can you shed a little light into what the difference is, how you identify them, how do you leverage both of them? Like, just give us a good general overview of that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you raised that, Elise. We did a tremendous amount of research to try to figure out, okay, how do we bring these groups together? How do we get them to make good, sound, healthy purchase decisions for their business, the right decision for their business? And when you step back and you look at all the data, there's a variety of different ways to attack this, but one of the most important we found was attaching yourself to the right stakeholder. And so we did a massive analysis. And through the course of this analysis, we found 7 different profiles. To keep it brief, I'm not going to go through all 7, but basically the 7 different profiles sort themselves into kind of 3 main categories. So as you mentioned, there's mobilizers, there's talkers, and then there's a third category we call the blocker. The blocker, as you can imagine, is not the stakeholder you want to kind of hitch your wagon to. Blockers are interesting, though. It's not so much they're against your solution most commonly as they're just anti-change. They just don't want to do anything. The common thing you'll hear from these customers is, we're just in implementation mode. Can you check back in 6-8 months? That's the type of thing you hear from a blocker. So kind of push them off to the side, and you're left with 2 other groups, what we call talkers and mobilizers. And where it gets really interesting is if you look at a lot of the sales training, if you look at a lot of the sales methods out there, and I won't name names as to the different types of profiles, but if you do some basic research on kind of sales methods and different profiles, stakeholder profiles, you'll hear things around kind of classic coaches or advocates or champions that you should look for. The reality is we found most of the traits of those classic coaches, advocates, or champions actually sit in this group called the talkers. Highly accessible individuals, willing to take a sales call, willing to network you inside the organization, dish the dirt on what's happening in the organization. They have skin in the game and want you to win the business. Those profiles we found in this group called a talker. And when you look at the data, the ability of a talker to drive change, as we talked about inside of a company, is very little. These people often lack credibility. Their counterparts and their colleagues view them as having an alternate agenda, kind of selfish motivations at times. So these individuals really aren't able to carry that flag into the organization and say, hey, we need to do something different. Now, conversely, when you look at mobilizers, these individuals were really interesting in that nowhere in their DNA or in the profiles did you see that they value vendor interactions. In fact, they're very and deeply supplier agnostic. They don't care about you or your products or your solutions. What they care about are great ideas for their business, and that's kind of their currency. That's how you have to talk to these individuals, as ideas they can go back and then champion more broadly inside their company. And so a big part of how you have to engage them is with those messages, those insights we just talked about. But the important part is you want to identify people who are often initially skeptical. They push back. They ask hard questions. Now, for most sellers, if we're honest with ourselves, we sit down and we've got that big, bold idea, and the customer starts seemingly doubting that idea, right? What do? Well, you throw that pitch deck away. You throw away the collateral. You go back and you knock your marketing counterpart upside the head, and you say they didn't like it. But the reality is that was probably a mobilizer who was trying to get their head around, is this something I could feasibly take back to my colleagues, put on the table as a new direction for our business, and start that process? And that individual is really important to bring the group together. So in a nutshell, that's how we think about this mobilizer, talker, blocker distinction.
Mm-hmm. It's so funny, even just thinking about my own experience, the best sales I've ever made and my clients who have ended up being my favorites have always been the ones that were so flippin' hard to get in with every single time, right? And the ones where it's too easy, something always ends up falling apart.
Yeah, and it's like God bless the brand new seller who shows up there with all the enthusiasm and puts a big idea on the table, and boom, the jaws get closed on them. And the reality is that was probably the right person, and they'll never want to talk to that person again.
So quickly, how would you identify a mobilizer? Would it be like by the way they talk to you? I'm assuming it's not job profile, right? I mean, you talk about that in the book. It's
definitively not.
Yeah. How would you identify one?
I've gone into organizations where they said, Nick, we took your book and we made our mobilizer profile. It's the VP of HR, see? And you go, no, it's not. And oftentimes we find the mobilizer profile sits a level below kind of the key decision maker who tends to buy your products. Often those are the folks who are really trying to drive the change because they're living with the problems. But yeah, it's not an org chart based. It's not a title based. What we look for individuals who are skeptical, but in a healthy way, we call healthy skepticism, towards big, bold ideas for their business. They really are concerned about the collective organization. They themselves aren't trying to create sort of their own agenda, their own platform, their own, a lot of times you see those whiffum people, right? The what's in it for me people. They're just trying to get promoted, and everybody inside the company knows you're just buying this thing to create a project you can use to parlay into a promotion. That's not cool. So they really talk about the broader good. And they try to really convey how they're helping their business more broadly versus their own personal agenda. And then the final thing that we really teach folks to look for is you got to give them homework. You got to give them homework. Go get me these data points, which, by the way, you're going to have to talk to finance, you're going to have to talk to IT, you're going to have to talk to HR, but I need you to show me you can bring those data points together. Get me a meeting with these individuals. Here's what I want to happen. So you give them homework. But we give a lot of guidance in the book around how to identify those individuals. Some really nice guides in there that I would encourage folks to check out. And just make sure, if you think about a deal that's been in your forecast, for 2, 3, 4 months and it hasn't closed, are you really working with a mobilizer? Or might you just have a talker who has a really sexy title? So be careful of that. They're out there.
Nick, I want to mention, this reminds me of teaching in small towns across North Carolina. And what I learned over the years is the person that has the power in the town is almost never the person with the title. It's like the woman who's in charge of the PTA or run some other association that actually has more power than the mayor and the other people in the town. And I think that's why it's so important that they don't look for title, but they look for these indicators. It's hard but good questions, like you're saying.
Yeah,
not just go for the level.
No, we did a big survey of the true sort of senior decision makers, senior executives, and tried to understand what drives their purchase decision, thinking it's going to be how great the return on investment might be, or how confident they are in a supplier's capabilities. Those things were on the list, but they were way down the list. You'd be surprised. The number one thing that mattered was, what does my team say? That's the number one thing they cared about. And so you're in this era now where there is no such thing. I say this very confidently. There's no such thing as a senior decision maker anymore. It's purchased by consensus. It's purchased by committee. The 5.4, the 6.8, however, whatever number you want to put on it, that is the group making the decision. That's where the decision rights sit. And so if you're not attacking that group more broadly and finding the right people who can bring them together, go working your way to the top, Vito, that whole era is kind of past us.
So it sounds like that salespeople need to develop or enhance their relationship building skills to the point where they can kind of figure out how to work with each of these people on the buying committee. I think in the book you actually talked about how maybe that if I can remember how it was kind of phrased, it is you don't need to take like the days of catering to a very specific individual and then getting them into the room to get them to kind of like the parts that they like. That's not what Challenger Customer is exactly about. And I think that may have been kind of discussed in Challenger Sale. Could you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, and I'll be brief here, but it was interesting because in Challenger Sale, the first book that we put out, which I think a lot of folks will know, we talked about 3 key behaviors of a good Challenger seller. So teaching tailoring, which means tailor to the person you're working with, and then taking control of the conversation. So those became kind of the DNA of the Challenger. Interestingly enough, our research a couple of years later, and this is what's fun about being a research shop, is you're constantly learning things. The research showed us a little bit later, we saw this really interesting data point that the better you are at essentially appealing to any individual stakeholders' concerns or kind of their value drivers. So let's say I've got finance, a marketer, and HR for whatever reason. For finance, if I'm appealing to just the cost savings potential, for let's say an IT person, I'm appealing to how well my system might integrate with theirs and the seamless integration and limited downside risk to their IT infrastructure. And let's say for a marketer, I'm talking about, I don't know, some sort of analytics, that my platform can do. I'm just making this up as I go, but you get a sense, I'm not going to talk to each one of them. I wouldn't talk to finance about the analytics. They don't care. And so the degree to which I highlight the things I really care about for each individual, what happens invariably is the likelihood I can get them to agree on something actually goes down. And that really it flies in the face of a lot of sales training out there, which would say, make sure you're really catering to each person's economic concerns, their value drivers. What we really advocate in the book is finding that more common set of problems and solutions for the business they need to focus on and helping them get on the same page of what is the problem. What is the problem you're really trying to address? Now, how are you going to address that? And finally, why am I the best supplier to do that? But that does take tremendous amounts of discipline, and you have to make sure you're bringing them together versus inadvertently kind of pushing them apart, almost repelling them, because they'll never get on the same page and make that big, bold purchase decision if you're just keeping each one of them in their little corner and focusing on those value drivers that are only relevant to them, not that 6.8 or 5.4.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. So salespeople have to become even better at connecting folks than ever before, especially when it comes to just the buying committee.
It's connection, but I think it's also going back to Lisa's point around the Mobilizer. I think that individual really does become a channel almost into the process of connecting them. I may not have access to all of them. I may not ever meet all 6.8, but my Mobilizer does. And so really making sure you have that right person who can bring those groups together and then helping your Mobilizer, here's the problem we've agreed on, but here's how you want to talk to finance about that particular problem. Here's how you want to talk to your IT counterpart about that problem. So giving them some coaching and helping them understand, here's what they're going to say, here's how you need to respond to that.
Okay.
That's what becomes critical.
Very good. No, go ahead, Elise. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. I have so many questions. I'm like,
good.
Holding them all back. One of the things that I was also curious about, Nick, is, when I coach clients on selling larger deals, one of the things that we often see kill them is just a lack of sense of urgency, right? In addition to not selling to the right people. And so I was curious from your research and even thinking about in the framework of the Challenger Customer, anything else that you see that helps create a sense of urgency? I mean, clearly creating pain around sticking with their current situation, I could see as one, but is there anything else, or is it really you just have to be great at creating that pain through your insights?
Look, I think a great insight inherently creates that pain. I would honestly, Lisa, I'd go back to what we talked about a bit earlier, which is, the thing, if I rephrase your question ever so slightly as to what do I see where organizations or individual salespeople miss the pain, is we want to run to the solution. We want to run to the solution, the fix, how it could be so much better. We don't spend enough time on the problem and on the customer's current approach to the business. I cannot underscore this point enough. And for those of you who are going to go out and pick up the book, I would give chapter 3 a hard study because it is a fantastic chapter around structuring that pain effectively and saying, look, you have to first show them what they're doing. You want them to violently agree. Yeah, that's how we're thinking about things. Now, here's what's wrong with them. Here's where the cracks in the armor are, so to speak. And then you begin to expose those. And by doing so, you're creating a much better platform for them to receive the solution, right? Here's what you need to do now. But I think so many of us humans, this is like long proven social science. We as humans we are biased to run to fixes. We want to run to solutions. You got to stew on that problem, and you got to make sure they are crystal clear on it. Otherwise, the thing won't move forward until you have that broader group understanding. Yeah, this is really what's going on in our business. This is what we're missing. Here's what we've got to do to fix it. Okay, who can help us better than anybody else? Oh, these guys, great. So that's really, that would be my advice. That's the number one thing I see so many companies miss. We just run to the solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have an acronym that we teach clients at Southwestern Consulting because it's human nature to not want to create pain, right? So we use this acronym, which sounds horrible when you first hear it, but it's CPR, cut the wound, pour in the salt, and then remedy the solution, right? And it's just this reminder that after you've asked those first surface level questions that have exposed a little bit of pain, if you move on, you still haven't done enough to create the pain, right? So you got to really dig in.
Right? It's like, oh gosh, yeah, they're buying into it. I gotta help them fix it. You just stew on that for some time. And I think that's the thing you really, we do a lot of work where we look at deals and where they break down and where consensus breaks down among customers. And if you think about a sale as having a problem phase, right, a solution phase, and then a supplier phase, right? Very simple 3-step motion that customers generally have to go through. Most commonly, you see the hardest point isn't so much the supplier. That's the easy decision. By the time they're really deciding the supplier, it becomes fairly obvious who's going to be the supplier of choice. The harder thing, and I think customers struggle with, is really defining the problem and defining what they have to do about the problem. That's where you see the dysfunction spike the highest, not the supplier. That's easy. So I really urge folks to spend time there.
So does this apply at all then if you're in a sales position where you're more having to create that need on the front end? And I think about it, in our case, like we're selling sales training and sales coaching. And I have yet to find an organization that's reached out to me to say, we've identified our problem and it's not enough coaching, right? Not enough sales training. So, and for my clients too, like a lot of times we're calling on people where we're having to create that need in the first place. And I know a lot of your book talks about, you've got the buyer committee, they've identified the problem, they've identified the solution, now they're reaching out, it's maybe RFP time. Does this apply when you're looking at kind of you flip that situation on its head and there isn't a buying committee and they don't know that they even have a problem?
Like a hammer looking for a nail. But,
yeah.
What's interesting, and so I'll reflect a bit on my own business and my own company. So CEB, now Gartner, has for years, we were in the advisory space. And I often joke with my own sales team, it's not like a customer wakes up in the morning and goes, I need advisory services for my business. Who can I call? Right? It's just not a thing they do. And so a large part when I'm working with companies that are in sectors just like yours and in my business, where, there's not a natural point of pain where the customer is going to call us, but there is a point of pain we're helping solve. Every one of our businesses does it. Otherwise we wouldn't be in business. But you have to really step back and think about, right, how does the customer think about the options they have for solving that pain? You aren't on the radar necessarily, right? The types of services that you and I offer, we might not be on the radar initially. And so part of what we have to do is find ways to tap into that pain. So for me, advisory services, well, the reality is customers are making decisions every single day, but there's a lot of flaws in the information they're getting around how they make those decisions, and do they have confidence? Do they have confidence to bring it to their board? And so we really try to play into the pain points that they deal with in their everyday life, and then begin to show them there's a different way to think about the solution, right? It doesn't have to be from my company. It doesn't have to be go hire, a big name consultancy to come in and solve these problems. You can do it on a membership subscription to advisory services like mine. Similarly for you guys, I would imagine it's something akin to that. But I think a big part of it is understanding, going back to this, it's becoming a theme in this talk here, but how does the customer think about their business? How are they currently managing it? You've got to nail that down if you're going to go in and help disrupt that and help them think differently about, wow, I should be thinking about, these types of services that I would have never even initially thought of in the first place. So that's a bit of my advice there.
When it comes to this information, though, we hear a lot from a number of people out there who claim to be in social selling or they're experts in it and they're training and they're doing all this stuff out there. And social selling is great for prospecting and blah blah blah. So they believe that what they're doing is what's called thought leadership, and they're actually telling salespeople you need to be thought leaders out there. But in the book, you actually kind of go through another perspective, or asking salespeople to go a little bit deeper on this. And can you talk about that a little bit?
And commercial insight, right?
Exactly.
Go.
And we introduced that term in the Challenger sale, and we go much deeper in the Challenger customer. We do pick a fight with thought leadership. Thought leadership, look, the reality is, I think at some level we're all thought leaders, right? Anybody who's really truly participating in social selling in a meaningful way. And what I mean by that is not just spamming the world with stuff, but trying to make meaningful connections, putting meaningful content out there, researching customers in meaningful ways. I think on the surface, we're all thought leaders at some level. The thing you have to be really careful of is if I'm just putting net new ideas out there that don't really instigate that pain, that don't instigate that what we call frame breaking idea, where I have to break down how I think about the world. You have to break down that customer and expose what they've missed. If you're just introducing net new material, it's interesting, but again, it's like I read something and it's like, 92% of CIOs care about cloud computing. Well, I knew it was high. I didn't know it was 92%. Wonder what's for lunch, right? You're not going to change anybody's mind based on that. And so we really look to, there's a lot of companies that are doing a great job here where they're saying, okay, in a social soundbite, how can I possibly get someone to reconsider something? I think there's a lot of companies doing a great job where they're taking a good insight, a good idea that is very, very antagonistic, that helps the customer think differently, but they're kind of atomizing it in many ways and turning it into tools like interesting diagnostics that someone might take, a really valuable diagnostic. So one of the companies we talk about in the book is Smart. They make like smart boards, collaborative materials, right? You walk into some companies and you'll see these big whiteboards where you can write on it and share information. They've created really cool diagnostics, for example, that help teams understand how well do you collaborate, how healthy is it. Now, through the course of taking that really valuable diagnostic, I realized quickly, like, wow, we are way off the mark on this. And I start to question, have we got our collaborative environment set up right, the collaborative technologies, et cetera, and it leads them into a purchase, with smart technologies. So I think you can use social as a means to start to engage people. And so there's a framework we introduced in the book that's really helpful, but coming out with big kind of what we call spark ideas to bring someone and draw them into more of a learning journey where they understand, okay, we're not thinking about things the right way, but it does lead with very antagonistic messages that get someone to actually pay attention to it. Not 92% of CIOs care about cloud computing. That's what we would define as thought leadership, more broadly speaking.
Okay.
Hopefully that distinction is helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So now, so are we using thought leadership to help with the Mobilizer, or are we using commercial insights?
Commercial insights, guys. It's like the dog whistle for a Mobilizer. Remember, they are going to drive change for you, but they need that message and that platform to go in and say, hey, here's what we're doing, here's what's wrong with it, here's what we've got to do. It's really that simple. That new information, they won't pay attention to it because it's not about their business. It's not about what they're doing, and it's not exposing flaws in their own company. And that's what we have to do to get the attention of a Mobilizer. They'll just disregard it. They will never see it. It's noise.
So you would say, so I guess commercial insight is going to be more unique to that specific sales engagement, right?
Not necessarily. And okay. In fact, the companies we see that do a great job with commercial insights, now in some cases, if you're a key account manager and you're working a huge account, yeah, you might have some knowledge of that account that lets you make it very, very, very custom for that account. But what we see is really good commercial insights tend to scale quite well. So you can imagine, let's just say, picking on IT today, but let's say I'm selling like a marketing automation solution. Well, it turns out, a lot of customers probably think about marketing automation or lack thereof in a very similar way. And so I can come in with a message and a commercial insight around why they need to be thinking about engaging their customers and the analytics around that differently. And that message is really, really portable. It scales really well across industries, across sectors, across sizes of companies. So you'd be amazed when you find a good insight. It has legs. It may not be every customer, but these things, we really do try to urge our clients to look at it at more of at least a segment level, if not the entire customer base, where in some cases a great insight might apply for their entire customer set. And this is why we are really, really, really focused on getting marketing departments, in some cases even product teams, involved in creating these insights, because they understand how the customer thinks. They understand what the opportunity is to provoke that customer's thinking. If you're a one-man shop and you got a small business, or if you're working in a startup and there's not many salespeople or many marketers for that matter, sure, you can take it on yourself. It's going to take some added thought and time, but boy, I would, if you're in a leadership role, I would really start to urge your marketers to take on this responsibility so your salespeople can focus on delivering that message. They don't have to be the ones thinking through it every single time. That is just hard work. No one's got time for that on a daily basis. So.
Gotcha. Very good. Thank you for clearing that up. So, all right. So, you got anything else?
No, I just want to say, Elise, anything else you wanted to add, because these covered a lot of the stuff.
Yeah.
And we wanted to see what else you want to add to it.
Yeah, I think my final question would be, one of the things that we like to look at on this show is just the future of sales and where it's going. And so I think my final question for you, Nick, would be, given the direction that sales in general is going, with salespeople being replaced and AI and so much of the process getting automated, I mean, where do you, and I know that this model, this has evolved over the years because companies are getting more siloed. So looking out 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, do you see this changing? Do you see it evolving? Do you see it still being relevant? Like, what do you see projecting out into the future?
Yeah, and I think if anything, it's funny because often our data is misused and misquoted by a lot of organizations. And again, I won't name names out there, but one of our data points says that the customer is on average 57% of the way through a purchase before they engage a supplier. You couple that with this whole 5.8 thing, and a lot of people are arriving at the conclusion that, well, sales is dead. It's basically a marketing game that'll lead its way into, some sort of e-commerce thing, and let's just pull sales out of it and let customers buy what they want. I counter that by saying, look, the 57% is happening, but there's no guarantee the customer got it right. And all that research and all that learning and all the infighting and the dysfunction that they're going through, and to make sure customers are doing the right things for their business and to ensure that they're making the right decision, I think we're going to see sales become even more important. Now, where does AI come into that? Where do the analytics, predictive analytics, machine learning, all the bots and things? I believe those are going to be more and more enablers. Now, I do think the salesperson of the future has to be comfortable with the analytics. Right now, we are way too gut-based. It's like the analytics and the dashboard says I've got an unhealthy account. Yeah, they're fine. I just met with them. No, pay attention to the analytics. I think we need to get better about trusting that data and finding data scientists who can speak business and helping our sales teams know what to do with that data. But I think if anything, it's going to make us much more powerful, much more sharp, get to the right opportunities more quickly, segment customers in ways, I guarantee you guys this, in 10 years, we're going to be segmenting in ways we would have never thought of. Throw industry, throw geography, throw all that stuff out the window. And it's going to let us do that better of a job. I think in many cases, working with a smaller number of accounts, getting to know them better, getting them to buy more from us, and expanding relationships. So I think sales is alive and well, and I am happy to go on the record saying, I think we're going to continue to see a growth in the importance and really the responsibility that sales carries. We don't need to be talking brochures anymore. Digital takes care of that for us. We really need to help customers solve problems. And I know the best salespeople do that already, but man, I think the function, broadly speaking, is headed in that way in a really, really, really rapid rate. So,
and what I hear is using the digital tools, machine learning, and others to get more insight into their world. I mean, what is their digital footprint? Do we have tools that give us an idea? Like we interviewed the owner of Crystal Knows, where it scans and gives you an idea about the personality and how to build rapport with them.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. The sales rep of the future needs to be looking at how am I getting this digital content as well as the personal content as well as the analytics to go deeper into what is their world like?
Yeah.
Where's the shortcomings? Where's the problems? Where's the challenges before I ever get to my pitch?
Yeah, and I think a big part of it is trust that data. And that's the number one thing. It's funny. I would spend time with a huge company you all would know. Unfortunately, I can't say who they were, but they had this one big university that they were selling to, and their dashboard was blinking red that it was an unhealthy account. And the sales team saying, no, it's fine. We just met with them, no problem. And 6 months later, they dropped this massive service. And in the loss codes, the analytics team at this company went back and looked at the loss code in Salesforce. And the loss code was something around essentially not seeing it coming. Mm-hmm. That's what the account team put in place because they were going off instinct and not what the analytics were saying. We've got to get to a point where we start to trust those analytics much, much more because they are getting better and better every single day. So that's one of the biggest things I really would stress.
So I have a couple of recommended titles then for your next book.
Go for it. That's good.
So we have the Challenger relationship and then maybe Challenger analytics.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly.
We should definitely. Are you guys working on a sequel, or
Yeah. What's the third one? I don't know what that's even called. We've batted around a couple of ideas. I think we're sitting on just about. It's funny. It takes us about 4 or 5 years of good research to kind of come up with a big theme. So we're sitting on maybe something, and so we'll see here. We'll see here where we go next. So.
Awesome. Well, hopefully folks are hearing that here first.
That's right.
So very good. Awesome. Thank you very much for joining us today. If people want to get in touch with you or to learn more about CEB, now Gartner, and things like that, where should folks go?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think the quickest, easiest place to go is Gartner.com, where you can find inroads to all of our different practice areas. We put these two massive companies together, so it's a lot of coverage across a lot of different functional domains. So that's one place I'd recommend. For me personally, you can find me on LinkedIn. And my Twitter handle is Nick_Toman on Twitter. So those are two quick and easy ways to get a hold of me. But I certainly look forward to folks linking in with me. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I do a pretty decent amount of blogging and hopefully not too much thought leadership and of good, insightful content. So I would love it if folks do follow me or feel free to link in with me on LinkedIn as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. And folks, I would recommend, at minimum, follow Nick on LinkedIn. He's got some really great content out there that he's been publishing. And if you do follow him and, or send him an invite to connect, you'll definitely take advantage of that and enjoy it. So, so I guess do we have
one more thing. I'm just going to ask again, if you enjoy this show, let us know. Let's hear your comments. We really enjoy them. Everything like the indirect thing we got with Elise and others. And I'm going to ask for, if you enjoy the show, go to the platform where you heard it off of and take a moment and write a review. And if something you don't like, let us know as well. But that really helps us. It also inspires us to keep going. It really personally means a lot to me when someone made that effort to write a recommendation, write a comment, give feedback on the show, and took that. So I'm asking, please do that. I'd appreciate it. Check out socialselling.training. We got exciting information coming on. And I'll wrap up with Greg. Tell them how they can find us online.
So one last thing before we get to that is don't forget, check out the show notes. Look for episode 114. I'll also put a link to the book so that way you can pick up a copy of it on Amazon or listen to it on Audible. I strongly recommend getting it. Matter of fact, I would get both so you can have Audible read to you as you're reading the book, because you're going to really want to take and highlight and mark up the book.
Watch the road, though. Watch the road.
Don't do it while you're driving. Take it on the plane with you when you're traveling or something like that. Get both. Extremely helpful stuff. So thank you very much for Nick and for publishing this book, doing the research and all the stuff you guys are doing there. And also please express that to the other co-authors as well. We greatly appreciate it. I was just so enthralled with the book. I loved it.
How can they reach us?
So how can you reach us? Well, you have a number of different places where you can reach us. You can follow us on Twitter at linking in the number 2 sales, because they don't do more than 15 characters on the Twitter handle. You can follow us on YouTube as well. Go to youtube.com/linkingsales. Come out to Facebook, like our page out there at facebook.com/linking into sales. Also connect with us, all of us, on LinkedIn. You can send us a request. I'm Greg Hart. That's Martin Brossman.
Elise
That's
Archer.
You can just do searches for us there. You will definitely know who we are by our profile pictures, because we have very good profile pictures. Elise is like, she's got the best one though.
Yeah, that's right. I
She's got
agree.
the best
Yeah,
one.
that's all right.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyways, you guys have fun. Thank you very much for listening to Social Selling Podcast, and we look forward to serving you again in the future.
Excellent.